Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. I know this happened like 2 weeks ago. I wanted to get around to doing it. I might have gone just a tad overboard on the faction stuff, but I do care about it, so I thought it warranted that level of attention. Let's have a look at the survey that went out for Classic not so long ago. But two things before we start. Number one, if you want as close to a Classic experience as possible to how it was in Vanilla, I'm not sure that you are going to get that from Blizzard again. And I say again because Classic was likely as close as it's going to get. Any further variation is going to deviate further from the original format from what I can tell to try and offer players a slightly different experience and make the game worth another look, both in cadence and content, without totally compromising the feeling of how the game was then and keeping it within the spirit of Classic. I believe this as players have pretty common complaints as for certain areas of the game that deserve attention, as will be addressed in the survey. And Classic presented the biggest workload for Blizzard due to the lacking dataset from very early patches, so going or attempting to go full patch by patch progressive, for example, would be a nightmare for likely a lesser payload than leaning on the data they already have available or established, again with the intention of actually giving players something a bit new rather than copy pasting the game and putting it out as it was back then. With this in mind, combined with the proposed cadence changes to the life cycle of the game and the chance servers will relaunch sometime after they conclude, I'm overall quite loose when it comes to changing things on the possible relaunch, even if they seem quite drastic at a first glance. I understand that you want the game to be in the spirit of how it was, but you also don't want a ghost town, so it's likely there is going to be some compromising therein. The second thing to mention is that Blizzard going down the route of progression or fresh servers should come as no surprise. Over a year ago, Blizzard picked up Holly Longdale from Darkpaw Games, who headed up the EverQuest series under her alias Windstalker. You can see posts from as early as 2015 on their forums asking the community for opinions on progression servers and what they would prefer. She was also on BlizzConline this year on the panel for TBC as well. I don't understand exactly what's said here or how things went to EverQuest with these systems in place, but it looks as though they've had new servers released earlier this year in April, so at least it still exists and servers exist, which is one up on them not existing, I suppose. Oh, and one final thing before the survey, if you like what I'm doing here, sub to the channel. It helps immensely, it's free and it takes all of 2 seconds, and you can drop a like and a comment too to help with the algorithm RNG. You know the deal with how YouTube works by now, right? All that said, let's take a look at this thing. So first of all, for WoW Classic Fresh Start Realms, we're considering accelerating the cadence of new phase releases and making some changes to allow players to keep up. Which cadence would you prefer most for a WoW Classic Fresh Start Realm? We've got the original one, which is 21 to 22 months, accelerated 12-month cadence with a fresh start every 12 months, and accelerated 6 months with a fresh start every 6 months following. Now, the original one, I'm just going to straight up say, seems way too long. 12 months is perhaps on the long side as well, considering there is an intention to alter the game to fit a new cadence and launch new servers with the old one's conclusion. 6, in my opinion, seems a bit on the short side for the life of an MMO server. If I had this survey, I'd say other and around 8 to 10 months, which should be enough time for each phase, enough time to not have the server die in AQ, and be able to get stuck into Naxxramas with whatever changes are kept before the new server kicks off. Speed the server goes is quite dependent on the content in it though, which leads to the second part of the survey, the juicy stuff, and I'm going to tackle these a little bit out of order just for the sake of, well, you'll see, hopefully. First of all, faster XP rates. Depends on the server cadence to some extent. I'm saying this as somebody who's leveled a lot of characters in Classic and has since been working on the Draenei for TBC, and the 2.3 leveling changes do speed things up significantly. It feels a lot smoother, especially combined with the no more elites on group quests out in the world. This does reduce the impact of the open world and the progression level of your character, however. I would not be surprised if they did this. Personally, I'll be fine with no changes to the speed, but again, you need warm bodies to play the game in an MMO, and for a lot of people, they're going to be turned off before even trying. They hear no leveling speed changes. Next up, the Barber Shop. I've heard of faction pride, class pride, specialization pride. Is that I choose this haircut on the character creation screen pride? Someone out there probably. Don't see who this hurts, sure, why not, but only on Alliance, of course, though. Horde wouldn't be able to fit such a civilized feature into their society, of course. Earning gold at faster rates. The sole impact here would be on purchases which have a static value like repairs, respecs, new abilities, and most importantly, your mount and epic mount. I don't really see the point. Even if the server isn't alive forever, the pricing is quite high, but achievable, and I think it's something that players will be a lot more savvy working towards the second time around. The black market auction house. Did anybody actually have bank space for vanity items? I tried to collect things in Classic, and most of them are sitting on an alt as BOEs because we don't have any kind of collection logs whatsoever. There's no transmog, and to be honest, I kind of like seeing the transformation from pre-Bis clown suit to Bis clown suit that people have in Classic. Also, vanity items do still exist on the regular auction house like Tibu, so I don't really see the need for this. Summoning stones at dungeons. Maybe it's a bit of a lock bias thing here, but that extra utility you could bring to the group was very nice. However, I will say I do like only needing 2 people to summon instead of requiring 3. If anything, the Warlock version should have been more powerful. I know this is a TBC thing. Maybe Warlocks can power up summoning stones using soul shards and allow them to work for 5 minutes or something. Just a thought. Increased rate of item drops. I, again, don't feel this is needed. I've never really been somebody who raids for loot. I know a lot of people are, so I can see this being divisive. It makes those big drops more exciting and special and keeps the content fresh for a longer period of time rather than clearing for the formality of receiving purples. Original AV. Oh boy. Sure, let's see how it would have been. Why not? Hordes still start halfway up the map, except there's far more choke points and difficulty advancing with these changes. Good luck, Alliance. That's all I've got to say. In fact, I'd vote yes for this one, just to see if I'm totally right or wrong, or just for the sake of change at least. Why not? Let's see how it would have been. And finally, the big 3. More difficult raid and dungeon encounters, no world buffs in raid, and an increased debuff limit on raid bosses. All of these kind of go together as one big thing for me because they're all interlinked. And the TLDR is, yes, it's good, they should do it, or try it at least. So in order to buff rage, you need to be able to estimate how powerful players will be. World buffs were like a 30% power gain, give or take, depending on your class. One wipe on buff content could essentially lock you out until you've gone back and got your next set of buffs, giving a very negative gameplay loop and overly punishing content. And whilst players in original vanilla actually did this on progression bosses, I can't see people being overly keen to engage with that kind of content nowadays. So that would be why I think world buffs should be removed from raiding content. And that goes along with buffed raids. If they're actually somewhat interesting, they cannot exist at the same time as world buffs. As for dungeons, there are actually some kind of hard fights in dungeons where bosses just do a lot of damage, but sure, why not? We can give it a look. An increased debuff limit honestly only changes the game for Affliction Locks and Shadow Priest significantly at the moment. Every other class that hasn't been using debuffs isn't just because no debuff slots, but have a think about how your mana bar looks after a longer fight on a hybrid DPS. You can press Starfire and only Starfire for 2 minutes and you're going to need to end up down ranking even with a Dark Rune and a mana potion. I doubt this will make any considerable notice to the DPS rotation of hybrids without any significant changes to the mana efficiency of said classes, which goes into the region of actually changing classes for there to be real change. The same goes for enhancement, for ret, for elemental, you know the deal. I did say Shadow Priest will benefit because they just take up so many debuff slots with their regular rotation, but they're also prime ooming material after a few minutes too. Also, with the raids being harder, I would expect this to mean bosses have more health, compounding the issue of mana problems on some classes. Affliction Locks though, they're going to be living the dream. We get 10% hit from talents, we can use all our dots, we've got life tap to never go Sounds pretty good from a totally unbiased point of view. Maybe with buff content, bosses hit so hard that warriors can't even play Fury Prot anymore and have to go for more mitigation gear and defensively oriented talents, and then DPS as a trickle down effect have to play around that by generating less threat. It could shake up things a little bit more than you expect. The top DPS will still be the non-mana users as well, your rogues and warriors. They can always DPS to their fullest, allowing for the threat of course, without having to worry about going out of rage or energy. So yeah, all 3 of these pretty good. Give them a go for sure. There are 2 concerns initially though, given a potential classic fresh. Number 1, mage boosting and gold farms being unaddressed. All of the existing data of exactly how to boost in every single dungeon is very publicly available at this point in time. If we go in again without this addressed in any manner, then people are going to be generating absolutely untold amounts of gold from a very early point in time in dungeons such as Maradon, for example, which will be available early on. I don't know how this could be fixed or how easily it could be fixed, but it's something to think about because it was a bit of a problem in Classic. Secondly, all of these things mentioned here are things where Blizzard has the existing data or they're just kind of changing the difficulty slider on it. There are already in the game plenty of I'm gonna one-shot you mobs even if you have full health, they just don't have much health. Think of the Molten Destroyers in Molten Core, for example. If every single fight in the PvE scene turns into patchwork levels of you need to spam the tank for dear life non-stop before they get one shot, that would be a shame when there could be more depth to it. I'd hope the difficulty increases could be done in a mechanical sense, not just purely a numerical one. But I wouldn't hold my breath. I'd like to talk more about this in the future though, so stay tuned for that. But as a whole, these seem like some interesting changes for a first attempt, and they could breathe new life into Fresh and give us a slightly different perspective whilst keeping Azeroth we know and love. And honestly, I'm quite intrigued. Let me know your thoughts on it, whether you think it sounds interesting or whether it's just not much is going to change in the end. As always guys, thank you so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.